Hey IT friends, how you doing? Last night I recorded a video for today where I chose violence. You got spicy, Dean. But I was thinking this morning that it might be good to live, laugh, love, take a sip from my Ray Dunn mug. It's actually empty. My Ray Dunn mug here, and offer a little bit of practical thoughts as to what you should do, since I was so opinionated last night on what you shouldn't do. But I talked yesterday about how I don't understand why an MSP owner will choose a vendor based on nonsense features, specifically getting very riled up about how there's this trend of kind of sunk cost fallacy, hanging our hat on a vendor and saying, well, I've always been able to reach the CEO in a chat, or they've always offered me, month to month, or they've always had this or that sort of charming, cute, small town feature that we all know really isn't a scalable, profit driven model. And why would you do that? And so you can go and watch that video if you want to hear me get angry. But what I wanted to kind of direct today is what are some things you should look for when you're picking a vendor that may not be immediately obvious that will help you avoid that kind of frustration in the future. So there's a lot of already good content on the basics of picking a vendor. I'm not going to rehash all the basics, and a lot of that stuff is, I think, fairly obvious. I think where I would go with this, you're an MSP. There are things that you do that are intrinsic to your model, and a big part of that is shifting risk. The MSP relationship with a client is all about risk shift, who is going to be financially accountable for that risk, and then who's going to be put in control of trying to mitigate that risk so everybody can hopefully make some profit. And I would challenge all of you to think that same way about all of your vendors, big and small. You need to look at a vendor and say, not only how good is the product they make, in fact, I would say that's a secondary or tertiary concern. You want to look at how friendly is this vendor to the way I conduct business. I think a great example of this is billing. That's usually where most people get the most pissed off, anyways, about having to pay or being owed money. There's this level of cheapness that most new businesses have to be in by default, right? We have a very finite amount of revenue to pay our bills. I get that. Everybody has been in that stage. Helped up there is no different. My MSPs were no different. Gramacci was no different at one point either. I get that. You do reach a point when you need to stop thinking that way, and you want to look for vendors that also don't think that way, because in much the same way that your goal as an MSP is not to stay in a persistent state of break fix or block agreements or uncontracted month-to-month billing. Yes, I am saying month-to-month billing as an MSP is a low OML value add, and if you're fooling yourself and saying it's a high OML value add, I challenge you in the comments to talk to me about how high your operational maturity level is. Sorry. Anyways, you got to think the same way about a vendor. So you figure a vendor that comes in that has no commitments, you can engage, disengage month to month. Why? How mature is their offering? How incentivized are they to be deep in bed with you? It's a talk we're having right now at Helped. Is, for example, like, should there be a barrier to entry? Should there be some sort of cost to join the services? Should there be an onboarding? Should there be a commitment because there's a minimum cost to Helped to be able to bring on a new client? And as Help scales, that cost isn't negligible. And there will come a day, and this is an internal debate we've been having, there will come a day where we can't ignore it. And so what do you do at that point as a vendor? Well, you got to go back to everybody and say, hey, we now have a new fee, a new structure, a new thing. And everybody gets upset. It's the same as MSPing. Look for that. Find a vendor who's aligned with not how you need to price this minute, but where your business is growing to reasonably, and they're aligned with that. We've seen big vendors make this change. A really big one that we all really heart because they're great people is Huntress. Huntress literally had to do this a couple of years ago with their whole minimum amount and their whole model. This is a thing. You shouldn't be surprised that a vendor who offers you incredibly attractive, immature terms is going to reach a point if they're successful, where they're going to need to revoke those terms or change them to terms that are more scalable and sustainable. You just can't infinitely give a loss leader out. It's not a thing. There are people watching this who are going to disagree with everything I just said, and that's okay. I don't know everything. I'm not right about everything. I just want you to think about what you're doing. But to some of those people, I would like to give a really great example. So at my former MSP, we reached a point where we had standardized our entire edge device and security offering around Sophos. So we did that for a few reasons. I'm not a security guy. I'm not here to lecture you on the best way to implement stuff. Certainly wasn't an MSSP. But we'd standardized around Sophos because Sophos had an incredibly MSP-friendly method of pricing, managing, and delivering their services. So it made it really, really, really easy for me to conduct business, and they had a scalability model that went up beyond 10,000 units. So it was very, very easy for me to add that into our stack, to go in and to roll that out and train my team. Anyways, and there's plenty of products that are like that. We got acquired by an MSP that was bigger than us, that I could maybe say wasn't quite as operationally shipshape as we were. We were also smaller. But they were in a much bigger, more successful market than us and had objectively just done better at MSPing. And they came in and they were really big into using Palo Alto. And the CTO had basically sat me down and explained, here's why we use Palo Alto. And all the reasonings I heard, they were fine. It's a great product, very highly rated in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. All of these security things that go over Dean's head, but made a lot of sense to me. Their client base needed a higher end product like that, yada, yada, yada. And my objection to all of that was, yeah, but it's not MSP friendly. So you're not doing any of those things. And that's kind of goes back to my angry post yesterday. If I buy a Ferrari, which there's many good cars, but I think we would all agree most Ferraris are amongst the pinnacle of engineering. I mean, that is the definition of both mechanically, experience, and sort of branding the car. And if I go out and buy a Ferrari, and I live here in eastern Massachusetts, where we get frost heaves and potholes and have unpaved roads, am I going to be able to even drive that Ferrari? And assuming that I can, am I going to be able to drive it the way it's supposed to be driven? Or am I going to be going 25 miles an hour really slowly, constantly puckering, clutching the steering wheel, worried that any bump I hit is going to be the very last bump as my car gives out that death gasp as I hear something break? Because that's probably what's going to happen. So I don't drive a Ferrari. There's other factors. I drive a Subaru, mostly because I'm poor. But you get my point. Even though that Ferrari is objectively a better engineering marvel than my Subaru Forester, I can't use any of it. So what the hell difference does it make? And this goes back to this idea of picking a vendor that's MSP friendly. You need vendors who make products and have business philosophies that align with yours. And not just that align with yours today, but that align with yours in the slightly longer term. I know we don't have a time machine. We don't have a crystal ball. I know you can't predict what a vendor's going to do 10 years from now, 15 years from now, but you can reasonably extrapolate based on market trends, the product category they fill, what they say they've been doing in their product announcements and whatever, on the general direction they're heading in. And you can align from that. Do they align with the direction you're heading in? And in my case, I am not moving somewhere like out to the Midwest where there's, very long, flat, paved roads that don't get a lot of frost heaves in them so I can go drive my Ferrari super fast. I live here, and I'm going to live here for the, foreseeable future. This is not where one owns a Ferrari as their daily driver. This is where you own a Subaru or a light truck or something similar to that. Your MSP is the same. Taking that back for a second, in the case of the Palo, just so everybody understands that example, Palo doesn't have a central management console where I can have dozens or hundreds of Palos all checking in. I have to buy a Panorama license, which is super expensive. It's awesome. Don't get me wrong. It's a freaking Ferrari, but it's super expensive. I can only manage a few devices at a time, and I need separate panorama instances for each grouping that I then have to chain together. It's a huge pain in the ass for me to use that as an MSP. It's super expensive. Someone has to pay for that. It's either my clients or me. It's not practical. It's a Ferarri here in the winter in Massachusetts. It just doesn't make any sense, even though it's awesome. So we ended up doing a lot of Sophos. Still had the Ferarri on the lot, because it's awesome to have a Ferarri on the lot. We ended up doing a lot of Sophos, because Sophos was MSP friendly. You need to go out and find your products that are like that. You need to find products that are friendly to the way you run and conduct your business. So I've talked a bit in the last few videos about most MSPs aren't terrible, and I would argue that most vendors as well. They're not waking up and trying to be terrible. When discounting when a vendor, just like you as an MSP, makes a genuine mistake, which can absolutely happen, and I do understand that some vendors make more genuine mistakes than others, and that does get tiring and old. That aside, when, for example, Kaseya buys Datto, and everybody is like, they've destroyed Datto. I mean, maybe, but it's a BCDR product with a ticketing system bolted on. That Datto bot that some people are going to argue Datto destroyed Autotask, incidentally. Go find another one then. There's lots of them. Many of them work just as well. But to get insulted as though somebody came in and took your feature value prop around, I've been a Datto customer for 15 years and such element has never changed. They've been clearly advertising for like the last year and a half that they're acquiring / looking to be acquired. And then that happens. That doesn't need to be something that ruins your business as an MSP, nor should it be. And if you're not being strategic with your own tool usage and building a system of processes and procedure and people, agnostic of your tools, that can work around them and survive those changes to keep delivering on your product, which is amazing service. If you're not working on that, why would your clients buy from you? And I mean, you think back to my Ferarri example. If the town where I live doesn't have any Ferarri mechanics, they don't, and they don't keep their roads in Ferarri shape, is it their fault or is it my fault for knowing that and still buying a Ferarri? Have a great Tuesday, everybody. You all deserve to own a Ferarri.